Imagine this. Sievo, 1993. You're in what was once a middle-class neighborhood, and your neighbor, a banker before the war, is offering you a gold necklace. Not for sustenance, not for medicine, but for a pack of cigarettes and 3 Bic lighters. He's desperate. The necklace is genuine gold, probably worth 2 months' salary in peacetime. Yet, in a city under siege, without electricity, running water, or food distribution, that gold is merely shiny metal. The lighters, however, are for survival. Fire for cooking, for warmth, for boiling water to prevent dysentery. This isn't a fictional account. It was documented by Selko Begovic, who endured over a year of that siege. What truly disturbs me is realizing he observed people with gold starve, while those with practical skills and tools thrived. Conventional prepper wisdom often advises accumulating gold and silver, asserting, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. I've even echoed this sentiment myself. However, a forensic examination of actual events during total economic collapse, not theory, but documented reality, reveals gold's value pales in comparison to something else entirely: skills, land, tools, and community. This is the Amish hedge. By the end of this video, you'll understand why an investment of $1,000 in the right practical goods and skills will save your family when $10,000 in gold bullion won't. Let me illustrate the recurring pattern, for this has happened before, multiple times in various countries, with the data consistently telling the same story. First, currency collapse occurs faster than anyone deems possible. In Bosnia, the transition from a functional money-based economy to pure barter took months, not years. Selko recorded how, in the initial stages, people still attempted to use currency. Within weeks, prices skyrocketed by factors of 20, 30, even 100. A pack of cigarettes costing 1.5 German marks outside the war zone fetched 40 marks inside. Venezuela, from 2016 to the present, witnessed inflation exceeding 1,000,000%. Its currency, the bolivar, became so worthless, Venezuelans jokingly termed it the Bolivar Muerto, or dead bolivar. The government's response was to remove high-denomination bills from circulation, giving citizens 72 hours to exchange currency that was effectively being declared illegal. 72 hours. Picture that, your life savings, with only 3 days to convert before the government deems it worthless paper. Argentina, 1998 to 2002, saw its economy contract by 28%, with over 50% of the population falling below the poverty line. Those who had their savings denominated in pesos suffered devastating losses. The pattern, stages, and outcome were identical. Second, when currency fails, economies regress to barter, and only utility matters. In Venezuela today, fishermen at a beach resort called Patanemo exchanged their catch for rice, plantains, and bananas brought by people walking from nearby towns. One fisherman explicitly stated, "Money doesn't buy anything, so it's better for people to bring food so we can give them fish." Farmers travel hundreds of kilometers to Caracas, carrying 200 bananas, 30 kilos of yams, 30 kilos of cassava, and 40 kilos of lemons to exchange for flour, rice, or pasta. Not to sell for currency, but to directly swap for other goods. In coffee-growing regions, hardware stores accept coffee beans as payment. 3 100-kilo sacks of coffee trade for 200 liters of gasoline. Coffee beans have become currency because they are standardized, consumable, and possess use value. This is economic reversion. Modern collapse sends societies back to pre-industrial barter. In such an environment, gold is useless. You cannot eat it, burn it for heat, use it to purify water, or treat an infected wound. But the person who can grow food, repair a water pump, or has stockpiled antibiotics and hygiene supplies, that person survives. Third, the Great Depression demonstrated that land and skills outweigh everything else. Farmers during the Great Depression struggled, with crop prices plummeting to devastating lows. Some burned corn as fuel because it was cheaper than coal. Yet, farmers with productive land held an irreplaceable advantage. They could produce their own food. Documented experiences from rural Iowa reveal that farm families cultivated large vegetable gardens, canned fruit from orchards, produced milk and cream from dairy cattle, and provided themselves with meat and eggs from chickens. They purchased flour and sugar in 50-pound sacks and baked their own bread. Farm wives made clothing from fabric cut from flour and feed sacks. With zero cash income, they still survived. Urban families, however, were destitute. In Dubuque, Iowa, 2,200 workers lost their jobs between 1927 and 1934. These workers, even if they had maintained their wages, which nominally dropped 30%, faced hunger because they lacked productive capacity. A grandfather, commenting on my last video, perfectly encapsulated this. My grandfather survived the Great Depression because he had a small 4-acre farm, carpentry, and painting skills. Not gold, not savings, land, and skills. Here's the critical point. Victory gardens during World War II proved this principle at scale. More than 20 million gardens were planted in 1943, yielding 10 billion pounds of food. 40% of the entire U.S. vegetable supply originated from these gardens, and 2/3 of them were in towns, cities, and suburban areas. By 1944, over half of Americans cultivating gardens reported doing so out of economic need, not patriotic motivation. The mechanism is mathematical. Farmland generates income, crops, rental value, and direct food regardless of economic conditions. Academic data shows farmland increased 17% during the 2008 to 2009 financial crisis, while the S&P 500 declined 46%. Between 2000 and 2009, the S&P 500 posted negative returns in 28 different quarters. In 26 of those 28 quarters when stocks declined, farmland consistently posted positive returns. This represents not speculation, but insurance. Fourth, skills emerged as survival capital, and the list is specific. Depression-era survival strategies read like a catalog of practical production. People caught and sold fish, made homemade fudge, grew and sold berries, started lunch wagons, shoveled snow, made and sold hand-woven baskets and quilts, mended and altered clothes, washed windows, rendered lard, butchered animals, and preserved food by canning. What's the common thread? Every item involves creating or processing something of tangible value: food, clothing, or shelter-related services. The skills that commanded the highest value were those addressing fundamental human needs: food production and preservation, clothing production and repair, shelter improvement, healthcare, and mechanical repair. A person capable of slaughtering an animal, smoking meat, or canning vegetables possessed income-generating skills that no economic collapse could eliminate. Doctors, nurses, and dentists remained employed throughout the Depression. People found ways to compensate them, even when currency was unreliable, trading goods and services for medical care. Here's what gold critics miss. A skilled carpenter represents a valuable asset that cannot be stored in a vault. The skill resides within the person and can be deployed whenever needed. Gold merely sits in a safe, producing nothing. Fifth, Selko's testimony reveals what genuinely traded during total collapse. When currency became worthless, certain items became most valuable. Ammunition ranked highest because people needed it for hunting and self-defense. But Selko cautioned against trading it freely, noting, "Whatever you sell to another person in the way of a weapon may be used on you by that person the next day." Security considerations superseded all other trading decisions in a true collapse. Hygiene items held remarkable value. Bleach could purify hundreds of gallons of water, worth far more than its suggested cost. Bars of soap, toothpaste, and feminine hygiene products commanded high prices. A bar of soap that cost 50 cents before the war could trade for a dozen eggs during the siege. Medicine held extremely high value. Antibiotics, pain relievers, and first aid supplies. Many people died from lack of access to basic medications. However, here's the revelation that transforms everything. Selko recommends owning 1,000 Bic lighters instead of a fuel-powered generator. Let that truly sink in. A generator costs thousands. Why lighters? A generator creates noise, consumes fuel, demands maintenance, and attracts attention from potential thieves. Lighters are silent, portable, distributed across multiple units, so losing some doesn't strip you of fire-starting capability. Cheap to acquire now and can be refilled. Small, practical items addressing fundamental needs hold more reliable value than spectacular technological solutions vulnerable to theft or dependent on scarce fuel. Selko had a large propane tank rigged to refill disposable Bic lighters. He traded filled lighters for food, candles, and other necessities. The insight is profound. A lighter provides fire for heating, cooking, and light. In a siege environment, these functions are non-negotiable. And here's what astonishes people. Gold and jewelry held poor value during the crisis itself. Selko observed that warlords seized precious metals from desperate individuals for what amounted to the value of a can of soup. While metals would regain value once the crisis ended, they were utterly worthless for immediate survival. Sixth, Venezuela offers real-time proof. This isn't historical theory. Venezuela's collapse is unfolding as we speak. A woman named Keila Oval grows eggplant, tomatoes, and passion fruit in her backyard, specifically for bartering, exchanging them for pasta, sugar, milk, or rice. She noted that this lifestyle mirrors how her family lived in the early 20th century. Modern economic collapse reverts societies to pre-modern economic modes. A fisherman in Patanemo stated, "I haven't been to the city center in almost 2 years. What would I do there? I don't have enough money to buy a shirt or a pair of shorts. I'm better off here, swapping things to survive." Official currency became so devalued that the effort to earn it through employment no longer justified the reward. In Zimbabwe's concurrent economic breakdown, black market pharmaceuticals flourished. Antibiotics, which fetched dollars in stable nations, commanded black market prices several times their original cost. A single dose of amoxicillin could be equivalent to weeks of wages. Individuals who stockpile essential antibiotics, bandages, pain relievers, and antiseptic supplies possess incredibly valuable assets, considering their cost and storage requirements. Compare this to precious metals. Someone with a pound of silver couldn't treat an infected wound with it, couldn't consume it, and couldn't burn it for warmth. Whereas a bottle of antibiotics could literally be the difference between life and death. If you're realizing that everything you once believed about financial security is incorrect, then subscribe. This channel is dedicated to financial forensics. I conduct analyses of failed empires so you can recognize patterns before they reoccur in your own environment. Leave a helicopter emoji if you are preparing for future events, and let me know what topic you'd like me to investigate next. I review every single comment. Number 7. Community networks are an underestimated asset that determines who survives. Meta-analytic studies incorporating 148 research papers and involving 308,849 participants revealed that individuals with stronger social connections had a 50% higher likelihood of survival compared to those with weak social ties. That's a 50% increase. This effect size is comparable to the benefits of quitting smoking and surpasses many well-documented risk factors for mortality. Selko's first-hand account corroborates this, noting that almost all exchanges occurred through private arrangements after obtaining information about someone who possessed what you sought to trade. The most favorable situations arose if you knew the person before the conflict, having already established trust. Trust-based relationships evolve into economic infrastructure when formal systems disintegrate. One commenter wrote, "An Amish community that shares and helps each other. Community is one thing missing from many survival strategies." Exactly. Communities with established structures, neighborhood organizations, churches, mutual aid networks, can coordinate responses, pool resources, and provide support much more effectively than isolated households. In Venezuela, communities informally organized food sharing and barter networks to aid in distributing scarce resources. In Bosnia, communities rallied around trusted leaders to manage security, allocate resources, and coordinate survival strategies. For modern preparedness, this implies that developing relationships with neighbors, participating in community organizations, and building trust-based networks should be as high a priority as stockpiling supplies. Social capital is survival capital. Number 8. Comparative analysis disproves gold's claim as collapse insurance. Let me demonstrate gold's fundamental flaw as a hedge against collapse. During the Bosnian siege, where the economic system suffered the most complete breakdown, gold held virtually no value during the crisis itself. The core issue is that gold generates no income and addresses no immediate survival need. Food sustains you. Tools enable production and repair. Skills provide services that people will trade for. But gold is inedible, non-functional, and only valuable if someone else desires to exchange for it. In the initial phases of collapse, when people are desperate for food, tools, and medicine, gold is not what they seek. In later stages, when civilization stabilizes around a new equilibrium, gold might regain its value. However, the person holding only gold, while others possess productive assets, will have endured the crisis without generating income or means of survival. During the 2008 to 2009 financial crisis, farmland appreciated by 17%, whereas the S&P 500 declined by 46%, and gold initially fell before recovering. Farmland delivered consistent income returns through rental value, crop sales, and direct food production, irrespective of other asset performance. Here's the harsh reality. Farmland's average volatility from 1992 to 2020 was 6.84%, less than half the S&P 500's volatility of 16.9%, and notably lower than gold's volatility of 14.8%. During periods of high inflation, farmland returns averaged 14.67% annually, more than double the average inflation rate itself. This is not theoretical, it's historical fact. So, where are we observing these indicators currently? Venezuela is in stage 5, complete collapse, with a barter economy and worthless currency. Turkey is in stage 3 and advancing, with official inflation being understated. Gold accounts have doubled as citizens abandon the lira. Lebanon is in stage 4. Banks froze accounts and the currency lost 98% of its value in 18 months. And then there's the elephant in the room, the United States. With $38 trillion in debt, the Congressional Budget Office forecasts indefinite deficits. Interest payments on the debt now surpass defense spending. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet has expanded by trillions since 2008. Central banks worldwide are acquiring gold at the fastest rate since 1996, buying more gold than U.S. Treasuries for the first time. One of you commented, "My only disagreement is this. This assumes that currencies collapse one at a time. I think we're looking at a general collapse of Western currencies within a couple of years." I concur. For the first time in recorded history, 100% of the world's currencies are fiat, with none backed by gold or any tangible asset. Given global interdependence, the destruction of major currencies will likely occur simultaneously, a domino effect, a systemic failure. So, the truly vital question is, what should you do? The Amish hedging strategy involves a diversified approach combining 5 elements. Firstly, acquire productive land if financially feasible. Even small-scale vegetable gardens offer significant food production capacity and help develop skills. Communities in Venezuela resorted to rooftop gardens and backyard food production out of necessity. Secondly, cultivate practical skills in high-demand areas: food production, gardening, animal husbandry, food preservation, repair skills, carpentry, plumbing, mechanical, and medical knowledge, first aid, basic nursing. These skills cannot be stolen, only diminished through disuse, and remain valuable regardless of the economic system. Thirdly, accumulate practical goods with direct utility and long shelf lives: medical supplies, tools, batteries, lighters, hygiene products, and preserved foods. These retain their usefulness irrespective of economic conditions and become barter currency during collapse scenarios. Fourthly, actively and deliberately build community networks. Participate in local organizations, foster relationships with neighbors, establish communication channels, and identify individuals with valuable skills and resources. Fifthly, hold some precious metals for optionality once the crisis stabilizes, but only after securing the first 4 elements. Gold offers no value during the crisis itself. Evidence from numerous documented collapses, Bosnia, Venezuela, the Great Depression, and recent U.S. recessions, converges on a consistent conclusion. When monetary systems fail and institutional support collapses, survival depends on productive capacity, practical skills, and community networks, not gold, savings, or financial assets. The question isn't if, it's whether you will position yourself to survive when it happens. If this forensic analysis offered you a fresh perspective, subscribe. This discussion was inspired by your comments on the previous video, requesting practical survival assets over financial theory. Drop a helicopter emoji if you are already preparing for what's coming, and tell me what you'd like me to investigate next. Some of you are already well prepared. One comment read, "My grandparents survived the Great Depression because they had land and skills." Another stated, "We've completely emptied our savings account and put everything into precious metals." That's a start, but ensure you maintain balance across all 5 elements. The only question is whether you'll foresee it or be standing in line wondering why bread costs 200 billion marks, while the person next to you trades a dozen eggs for a loaf because they own chickens. Now, diversify before you're